don't require high-resolution files, then these may work best. They're also very handy for storing and loading LUTs and presets. Blackmagic suggests that if you're shooting in 4K DCI or Ultra HD to use the UHS-2 cards and use the UHS-1 cards for all other HD purposes. Speed matters here, so the faster the speeds on the card, the better. A very important thing to note here is that if you're looking for high resolutions and high frame rates while recording with high bit rates, SD cards really might not be the best choice for storage, since the speeds and capacities that are available here are not right for those situations. CFast. This storage style comes standard for the Pocket 4K as well. The CFast 2.0 cards can support higher data rates, making them great for recording 4K and HD with high frame rates. A bunch of functionality of CFast cards is pretty similar to SD cards, so there's a small learning curve there. There is one major thing to remark on here, that's to carefully check out the specs of the CFast card you're purchasing or thinking of using, if you're planning on working with high data rate videos. The reason behind this is when it comes to CFast cards, they can have varying read and write speeds. And one thing to note here is that CFast cards tend to be fairly expensive, and unless you actually have a library of CFast cards already, it may be better to use alternative forms of storage, at least in my opinion. And now for the last form of storage, which is SSD. In the manual for the Pocket 4K, the section that talks about using these is titled USB-C flash disks. Now, don't get hung up on that thought, because it is definitely talking about solid-state drives here. These are external drives that use flash memory. Because they are larger than the card-style storage, they have to be mounted on the outside of the camera and connected via the USB-C port on the left side of your camera. I personally prefer the Samsung T5 version, although at the time of recording, that particular model has been discontinued, but you can still find it many places in stock on Best Buy and on Amazon, and a lot of times it's discounted. Regardless of the fact that there are plenty of these out there for purchase through legitimate avenues, so again, if you can get your hands on one, it's well worth it. If your search brings you beyond that model and there are others that work with this camera out there, keep in mind that not every SSD card on the market will work with the Pocket 4K. Blackmagic does keep an up-to-date list of which ones are most compatible, and you can find that at www.blackmagicdesign.com support, which I've included in the description. When it comes to formatting solid-state drives, there's really no difference than there is with the internal cards. You just need to make sure that you have formatted it to either OS X Extended or exFAT, depending on whether you're using Mac or PC, respectively. And that's about the section for storage, and if you're wanting to find more information or go more in depth on this topic, again, we've included links below under this chapter in the description. Number 4, preparing media. Using all three styles of storage isn't quite as simple as plug and play, but the formatting process is extremely easy and can be done right on the camera itself. I'm going to run through the process for you step by step. The first thing you're going to do is insert or mount your storage accordingly. If you went with either SD or a CFast, there are 2 individual ports for each style behind the door in the hand grip on the right side of the camera. If you went with the solid-state drive, then you will be connecting that to the USB-C port on the left side of the camera, and then mounting the SSD to the top of the camera or however you've built your rig out. Looking at your touchscreen, tap the storage indicator that shows up at the bottom of the screen to enter the storage manager. Depending on your storage style, you will see Format CFast card, Format SD card, or Format drive. So choose accordingly. If you want to manually change your real number in this process, tap Edit Real Number and enter the real number you want, then tap Update. You should have 2 formatting options from here. OS Extended, which is strictly for Mac users, and exFAT, which can be used for both Mac and PC. Keep in mind that if you do use Mac and choose exFAT, that it does not allow for journaling. You do get a chance to review and confirm before committing to Format Next. If you need to make changes, tap Cancel and start over. Otherwise, you can continue from there and hold down the Format button for 3 seconds. This is where you will find out if your formatting was successful or not. If so, congratulations, you're done formatting. And if you accidentally did this while your card was full of footage, I guess not congratulations. Just be careful with this. I had a situation once where I was out filming on a beach that was raining, and some water got on the camera and got into the settings and brought it to the format section, and I had to shut the camera off or else I was going to lose all my data that I had collected for the past couple of days. So be careful. On to the next section. Inputs and outputs. As I'm sure you've noticed, the Pocket 4K has a bunch of slots and ports for various media and equipment connections. Some you will use constantly, some you may never use at all. As with All things, of course, it depends on what you're using your camera for. Let's first talk about the HDMI port. The Pocket 4K has a full-size HDMI port that supports 10-bit 422 1080p HD video. It also has support for HDR and 2 channels of embedded audio. The most common thing that people use the HDMI port for is to connect to an external monitor. You can use the touchscreen as your monitor, but the screen already has so many functions going on, most users don't like using it that way anyways. Another pretty common use is to attach an ATEM mini switcher. This gives you more remote functionality when it comes to recording and settings adjustment. I'd be remiss to not include some information here regarding a common problem that users have experienced with this port, and that's HDMI burnout. This is pretty much exactly as it sounds. The HDMI port on the camera can literally burn out. This is caused by such things as using one power source for both your camera and external monitor, or just even using cheap aftermarket HDMI cords or power cords. The good news is that HDMI burnout does not break your whole camera, it just renders the port itself useless. But in saying that, I have seen cases where an entire camera's board can be fried and you have to send it in for replacement. And this can be potentially very pricey to fix, especially if you're out of warranty. So make sure your shortcuts are minimal and avoid hot plugging as well, which is basically plugging powered devices into your camera while your camera is on. And if you'd like to find out more about this issue and ways to avoid it, I've included further information below. Onto the Mini XLR. Also on the left side, you will find the Mini XLR port audio input, which is meant to be used with external microphones that do not have their own power. Using phantom power, the Mini XLR has a broadcast standard noise floor of -23 LUFS or about -71 decibels. While choosing your mic and cords, be sure to pay attention to your connectors. A standard XLR has a much larger circumference than the input on the camera itself, so a high-quality adapter may be required. Shotgun or boom mics, such as those made by Rode, tend to be the best in this situation. Avoid more dynamic mics here because those are harder to get a clean signal out of. A major limitation with using the Mini XLR is that it works best for a single microphone setup. You can absolutely connect an adapter that will allow for 2 XLR mics, but for best sound quality, typically 2 separate inputs are recommended. Next, we have the 3-point power. So whichever microphone you choose to use for this needs to have its own power supply, wired or wireless. Lots of users like this input for microphones such as wireless lavaliers or lapel mics. This input is not only for audio though. This is where you can also set up your timecode, aka the timing that synchronizes your devices across the spectrum, including the devices that you do your own editing on. Timecode is pretty important when it comes to making sure your audio and video sync up correctly. It's also necessary for keeping notes while shooting, so you can match up the note to the correct time in the footage. The timecode is actually done directly through the 3.5mm input via a method known as jam sync, where you plug your timecode generator into this input and automatically sync all of your interconnected devices to the same timecode. And we have a video on this and a couple other resources that you can find in the description below on how to use timecode with this camera. Number 4, the headphone jack. This is the input used to monitor your audio during recording and playback. Pretty standard and self-explanatory.